It's a pleasure to be joined by Jordan Jarrett-Bryan today. And it's great to have the opportunity to speak to you again, man. How's things?
Very well, my friend. Very well, Max, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. So, for context, alongside work, I've been lucky enough to take part in communications classes run by the Premier League, in which Jordan was one of the fantastic guests and really interesting to converse with. Jordan is a sports journalist and presenter for Channel 4, the founder of BlackAcademic Media, which I'm really interested in hearing more about later on, as well as the host of the Game Day Phone-In on TalkSport 2, which is 5 to 7, I believe, on Saturday.
That's correct, every Saturday.
Yes, sir. Now, I don't know if you know this, Jordan, but this isn't the first time that we've spoken on a podcast. I used to do a lot of work for an Everton fan page. After yesterday, the less said about them, the better.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I had the chance to go on the Football Fan podcast a couple of years back now. When Everton were managed by Marco Silva, and I think it was about Marco Silva that we had an interesting discussion.
Okay.
To kickstart the conversation in the podcast itself, I think football fan content and fan-driven content is a real interesting place to start, because of course people are very opinionated on it. I personally feel like there is a place for it because, as the saying goes, without fans, football is nothing. But I'm not sure if it's the right place to be in if you want to progress into a career in sports broadcasting. Partially because I feel the fact that it isn't impartial can have its drawbacks. It tends to be, a bubble in and of itself. But as I say, from our last conversation, I know we can get into some real interesting discussion. So I'd be really interested to hear how fan-led content has impacted your career, and if you believe whether it's a help or a hindrance to the game itself.
Well, I initially kind of got involved in the whole football fan phenomenon from not so much wanting to hear from football fans, but more from being a football fan who wanted to have an opinion on Arsenal. So the landscape in the mainstream was, up until about 8-9 years ago, you were hearing from the same kind of pundits and media voices regarding footballing issues. And some of them are great, some of them are not, but that's fine. But I just was thinking, well, no one's ever speaking to the fans. Like, it's all well and good hearing from the journalists, cool. Ex-players, cool. Media, sports media types, cool. But how about hearing from the fans? And what I was noticing was that there was either an agenda or a glossing over of certain views by people with interest. So, for example, if you're a former Liverpool player, most of them in the media are going to be reluctant to call out Steven Gerrard because he's such a big figure in the city, big figure within football. If he has a bad game or a bad run, there was this reluctance to kind of say that. Whereas football fans don't give a shit. Sorry, can we swear? Sorry, I'm swearing.
Yeah, of course you can. It doesn't matter.
Okay. There was a reluctance to kind of do that, whereas football fans just don't care. If they think someone's doing a poor job, they're going to say that. And that kind of rawness and that unfiltered nature is something that I think there's definitely value in. Where we are now, maybe 10 years on from the start of the kind of football fan phenomenon, it's almost gone now too far the other way. We've gone from not hearing what the fans think about football to now hearing everything they think about football fans. And almost with that is almost an entitlement where football fans now feel they have the right. I think this week with Steve Bruce was a good example. The issue in this debate around how people talked about him and described him. There's an entitlement there of football. I think it's people in society generally now, but football fans feeling like they have the right to say whatever they want, whenever they want, to whoever they want. If I pay my season ticket, if I pay to go and see Everton on the weekend, I have the right, to say whatever I want to Damari Gray or Rafael Benitez or the owner because, well, I'm paying, so I can say what I want. Well, no, you can't. So I think we've kind of gone too far now the other way. And I think that's where a lot of people have problems with football fan media, because it enables people that know nothing to say everything, and it also enables people to just be mean and just be cruel and not be able to differentiate between being constructive with your criticism and just being a dick and just being really, really out of order. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people, if you give them free reign, they're gonna, you let a fat kid into a candy store, he's not gonna have any control. He's gonna eat everything. Whereas I think what we need now is regulation, where people, I don't know how you even do this, but not everybody should have a voice. That is the reality. That's not really popular to say, but some people should just shut up and just listen and read and observe and learn. So, and I think to your question, is it conducive to kind of breaking into media, being part of that fan world? Well, it depends on where you want to go with it. If you wanted to be just someone that's involved in the energy of fan debate and fan talk, and I'm a part of that. I have a podcast. I'm also on TalkSport, which we're very heavily led by what the fans have to say. Then fine. But if you want to kind of be maybe, there's also a lot of snobbery, I think, around football fan content too, and fan channels and podcasts. There's a bit of snobbery around it. And I'll be honest, a lot of that was from me as well. I kind of was a bit like, nah, these idiots that can't speak properly, talking rubbish. But the fact is that there shouldn't be a snobbery around it, because everyone has a right to have an opinion. Some people articulate it better than others. Some people are wrong, some people are right. But I think we have to just accept that everybody now has a voice, and you have to tune in and tune out of what you want to hear and what you don't want to hear.
Very well said. And I think what you were saying earlier about almost being educated on your perspective and views, I think that across the board works for different societal issues as a whole, definitely. And I think we can talk about that when we talk about BlackAcademic, after doing a little bit of research into BlackAcademic. But additionally, when we last spoke, we had the opportunity to see your show reel, and say you have done a wide array of stuff in print, in audio, in video broadcasting, and all of which I've learned over time require just minute changes to your skill set. Like, different areas of your skill set is tested through the different forms. Before getting into your own story and what you've experienced in the industry, was there a particular area, whether that be print, audio, or video, that you had a natural inclination towards, and was one of those one that you really had to focus on to improve, to get better? Because if I do say so myself, you are pretty good across the board, mate. You are very, very good at what you do.
Thank you very much, man. Good question. I would probably say print, because when I started off initially as a journalist, video media wasn't a big thing. There was no YouTube, there was no Google, there was no vlogs. There wasn't even blogs. Do you know what I mean? So video content and video thing wasn't really a thing when I broke into. Writing was what I was really good at. Writing is what I enjoyed. Creative writing at school was the thing that I was the best at. I wasn't very good at many subjects at school, but one of the couple of things that I was very good at was creative writing. So I think when I started writing small articles for local papers and local magazines, that was the first time I was like, yeah, this is going to be my entry into media. Broadcast media wasn't even a thing. So radio and TV and online, that wasn't a thing for me back then. I just wanted to write. And then once I was writing for a while, I tried my hand at a bit of radio. I did some radio so I did actually a pirate radio station. I was a DJ at that time, and I was invited to kind of join a pirate radio station. And on that, I first had my experience of actually talking into a mic and playing music and doing all that. And I loved it. And I thought I was quite good at it. And then I got a chance to join One Extra for a small stint to do a pilot show there. And that took my kind of broadcasting to another level. And I enjoyed that. And then I got into TV. I got into Channel 4 and did some stuff for Channel 4 for a couple of years. Then we did the Paralympics, and then I joined Channel 4 News, and then I had to learn a whole different skill. So to the second part of your question, I had to learn when I joined TV that writing for TV is different to writing for print. And you know, people think when you say you're a journalist and you're a writer, but you work in TV. Well, I've still got to write the scripts for what you see on TV. I'm still a writer. I'm still a journalist. Just because you don't see the writing, like in the newspaper, doesn't mean I don't write. But what I had to learn was that. So, for example, when we're recording this, in a couple of hours, it's Liverpool versus Manchester United. I've got to go downstairs and do a VT on that for Channel 4 News. Right. Now, what happens there is I had to learn how to write a script. So if Salah scores a goal, I have to write a script for that. If then Pogba hits the post, I've got to write a line for that, blah, blah, blah. What I learned very quickly, Max, was that I was writing my script for this, a minute package we're allowed to do. I was writing like a novel. Do you know what I mean? Because I was coming from print. And then my producer was like, Jordan, you've got pictures. You don't have to write every minutiae or describe every minutiae of Salah's goal. The viewer can see the goal. All you've got to do is set it up. Ball came across, Salah on his left foot, struck into the bottom corner for his 8th goal of the season. That's all you need to say. They can see everything else. It's television. Whereas in print, you have to be more descriptive. So you need to write a little bit more so the person can get a better idea in their mind. So that transition from writing for print to writing for television was a skill that I had to learn very early on as well.
Yeah, and that isn't, obviously you're a lot more established in the industry than myself, but that isn't too dissimilar to how I would describe my learning curve in a sense. Like growing up, going through education and things like that, I was always told I was a really talented writer. So I always was sort of inclined to write. But as I got towards, late teens, early 20s, I started to realize, although as you rightly say, at the time, this was the sports broadcasting almost was like a niche almost. And I was brought up believing that sports journalism, the sports media industry was a niche almost, but it seems as I got older that every man and his dog wants to be involved in sports journalism in a way. So I realized that there was almost like such an influx of people wanting to write about sports that I needed to try and do something to sort of stand out from the crowd almost. Hence, even though I would argue that it's my weakest skill, is why I do the podcast. Like I've always been a strong proponent of podcasts. I listened to podcasts in my early teenage years when they were still, and I mean, they still are very much a developing medium, but when they really were starting up, I don't know whether it's the god awful accents or what, but I always shied away from trying to talk or do video content in particular. So I can definitely emphasize in that learning curve and the responsibilities that you've got to take on to almost develop a completely new skill set. And interestingly, I was watching recently an interview that you gave on a YouTube channel, in which, if I'm not mistaken, you said that you were a editor for a magazine at a very early age, like around 13. I'd be really interested to hear about your experiences leading you to where you are today, and I'm sure that had a massive impact on what you wanted to do.
That's where it all started, Max. That's where it all started. So I started writing. Well, I realized that I was really good at writing and I enjoyed it from like year 8 at school, in secondary. And my mum came to me one day and said, "Oh, I found this clipping from the South London Press, this magazine in Brixton. They're looking for young writers. Why don't you go along and see if you can get involved?" So I was like, "Okay, cool." So I went along. I said, "I'm from up the road. I'm young. I like writing. Your magazine looks cool. Can I be involved?" And they were like, "Yeah, cool." And I just started off writing like a couple of like reviews. I think my first piece was like a 50-word review on 50 Cent's new album or some PlayStation game. Like there was a game section of the magazine. I just reviewed some game, 50 words, and it was cool. It was fine. and I started doing a few more longer pieces, a few more features as well. And then within 18 months, they said to me, we'd love you to um, co-edit the magazine. And I mean, I was the editor, but I had a colleague, Cleo, who was my co-editor, but I was the editor, really. I mean, I was doing the thing. And it was one of the biggest lessons of my life, because for about the next 8 years, I was the editor at 13 of this magazine that was being produced in South London for young people about youth culture. And I had to learn all the skills. All of a sudden now, I wasn't just writing an article once an issue. I was not only writing the cover story, I had to commission the photographer. I had to commission all the other writers to write their articles. I had to proofread all the articles. I had to decide order of what goes in what part of the magazine. I had to decide the photos we use. I had to the design of the layout. As an editor, you have to be across everything. I had to go to various events. I had to go, some of them were really cool. There's an upside to it. I got to go to lots of concerts and gigs and cool events with some famous, cool people. But I also now have to go to the board meetings and the funding meetings, the boring one. Yeah. So I had to do everything. But it was a real big lesson in how a magazine is run. So you're not just writing an article anymore. You're writing an article and you're running every element of the magazine. And it was, and also I'm working with young people as a young person myself. So I had to also learn about relationships and how to, work with young people that no one's getting paid. So these young people that are committed, say, to writing a 1,000-word piece on Kano and his new tour. Well, they said that last week, but they could just not turn up again, not write it. They're not paying them, so there's no. So I had to learn about how to trust people, how to teach people about responsibility. Look, if you guys are saying you're going to do this, you got to do it. If you don't do it, you're leaving me in a position where I've got a page or two free. So all these things I had to learn and manage as well. So it was a massive learning curve for me, but I also did a lot of networking. So I got to meet some fantastic people and write for some national newspapers and some national magazines. And by the time I was 21, I had a portfolio of clippings and works that was just, some people don't have that at 50, and I had it at 21. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that was that shaped the start of my career in a massive, massive way.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think that this raises an interesting debate to digital media, specifically podcasts, because I have always said and viewed podcasts as a lot more than what people see at face value. I think as a host of a podcast, it provides that lesson in communication. Obviously, doing things over Zoom is a bit more, not necessarily awkward, but you don't necessarily get the social cues, just the different aspects of social interaction that you would otherwise if you were in a studio. But I also feel like it's a fantastic marketing tool and a networking tool at the same time. So if you meet somebody that you feel like may prove not necessarily a useful contact, but someone that you want to develop a professional relationship with, having that avenue to say, I have a podcast, would you like to come on it and talk about yourself, and or to build up a rapport with that person? I feel like that goes a very long way, almost in a sense of what you experienced as an editor of that magazine. So following the rise of digital, I'd say over the last 20 or so years, how would you say that that's impacted your career? Because you have also gone on to have, a really successful career in the digital space and as a video broadcaster.
Yeah, massively. I mean, the digital world has enabled me to set up a podcast, which you mentioned earlier on, Football Fans Podcast. It enabled me to set up BlackAcademic. These are all digital platforms that create content and enable me to build an audience and build a community and also get out a message. Do you know what I mean? So the digital platform just explosion in the last 20 years has been massive for me. It's something I've definitely taken advantage of. And I probably need to take advantage of it a little bit more actually as well. Maybe I'm not maximizing the opportunities that are there. But I've definitely taken advantage of some opportunities because I see the value in the digital world. So no, it's been great for me. It's been brilliant for me.
Yeah. Now, it certainly looks like you've had definitive experiences that have really helped shape you into the person that you are today. And I'd really be interested to hear as far as milestones go. So, for example, being that concise in what you wanted to do in year 8, for example, is very rare, I would say. So going on to become an editor at the age of 13, were there any particular milestones that you set for yourself over the course of your career? And how did that size up to certain actual achievements, for example? Because I know you've covered a lot of different events in different countries, which is really interesting.
Good question. I mean, I wanted to have like 3 or 4 businesses by the time I was, I think, 28. And that didn't happen. Didn't have one. Milestones. It's weird because I've done so much across basketball, across media, across DJing. I DJed for about 8-9 years across the world. I've done so many interesting, really cool things, but I'm just trying to think. None of them were actual milestones. I mean, it's a good question. Oh, actually, I suppose one milestone was definitely, I think, for most football media types or journalists, covering a World Cup. Covering a World Cup was something that I always wanted to do. That was a massive moment for me professionally and personally to kind of cover the Russia World Cup and be out there for a brawl for Channel 4 was a very, very important moment for me. And I felt a bit of vindication as well. Because I missed out on the one before in Brazil and I was gutted. And my colleague who was senior to me and rightfully was one that went, he went. But I really thought I was close to getting that gig. So I said to myself, in 4 years' time, I'm definitely going to Russia. That's a big one for me.
Nice.
Another one as well, just briefly, was the 2012 games. So I left the GB Paralympic squad, the junior squad, when I was 22. That's when you have to leave, because then the next step is go to the senior team. But I didn't. So I tapped out of professional basketball at that age. So not that age, I tapped out of international basketball for GB at that age to pursue my career in the media. And then covering, 7 years later, whatever it was, the wheelchair basketball team at the London Games in London. I would say 90% of the team, the GB team, was a team that I played with 8 years earlier. Was a nice symmetry of vindication again, because it was like I'm actually interviewing the guys that I left 8 years ago. Do you know what I mean? To pursue this job, and my first job in TV is do my friends. So that was a nice bit of vindication as well. So yeah, that was great. That was great.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And that almost switch, I would say, from cover. I would say going from culture to sports, but I would argue that sports is a cornerstone of culture itself. But going from print, covering like youth issues, to music, was that vision of working within the sports medium always on the cards for you, or was it just sort of right place, right time, the opportunity presented itself?
Do you mean setting up BlackAcademic?
Or going into the sports media space as a whole?
Oh, okay. Oh no, that was intentional. Yeah, that was very intentional. Yeah. That was when I was my work with Live magazine, and then with ATM and One Extra was mainly focused around music and youth culture, which was great, and I really enjoyed that. But my passion was always really sport. And I said to my mentor at the time, I remember saying to him, I want to get into sports broadcasting. And he said, that's great, but just so you know, it's the most competitive area of journalism, so it's not going to be easy. I was like, okay, that's fine, but I'm going to do it. And I was very, very intentional about breaking into sports media for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And I think, I mean, I've found out that myself, just how competitive that the space is. And you've got such a solid foundation of covering the likes of youth issues and societal issues, I would say, as we talked about previously in the class that we had. Talk to me now about BlackAcademic, because one of the things that I have found really useful to come from these classes from the Premier League is that it's taken the, like we were talking a little bit about before, the educational angle to, you know, the younger generation and future professionals on how to approach certain issues in society. And a lot of the class subject matter has been predicated on underrepresentation of minority groups, be that class, ethnicity, religion, learning from the likes of Leon, Natasha, and yourself, who are really involved in that as a whole, has been so insightful. So what was the thought process behind founding BlackAcademic?
Fed up of hearing Piers Morgan and Nick Ferrari talk about issues around Black culture they knew nothing about. And I just thought to myself, no, you don't get to speak in the mainstream about things you know nothing about. It was mainly set up just to represent a better representation. I'm not one of these people that likes to moan and complain. No, I'll rephrase that. That's a lie. I do moan and complain, but I always moan and complain, but with purpose. So if you're going to moan and complain, which is fine, do something about it. What are you going to do about it now? So I just thought, rather than just complaining about the lack of representation about Black culture in the mainstream, why don't you set up your own debate show? Put together a team. You know people. I can present it. It's pushing myself. Find a studio, and YouTube is now here. Put it out on YouTube and see how it goes. And that was the intention behind it. It was to really just empower my culture and the people within my community to feel better about themselves, feel inspired, feel empowered. And if it educates other people beyond our community at the same time, that's super dope, great.
Right.
But the primary motive was to set up BlackAcademic to be something that actually was Black owned, that spoke to Black issues in a very authentic, organic, and progressive way. I think the work we do on our platform for BlackAcademic does that. Listen, we're not going to rival YouTube or Google or any other platform anytime soon, but that's okay. What's important is that we're doing the work. We're doing the work, and if one Black person feels more positive about themselves and their prospects through seeing a show on BlackAcademic, then that's great. Then that's super great. And we're growing. We are growing all the time. I'm seeing it. I'm in no rush. There's no rush here. So it was just born out of better representation, but secondly, to just empower our own. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of negativity around Black culture and Black people. And I just thought, no, we need to reflect and celebrate the great things about our culture as well. That's not being shown maybe in the mainstream.
Yeah, yes, sir. One of the things in particular that I'd want to hear about is that process of seeing the platform grow. You were talking about, finding a studio, setting it up. That process of growth, I think, is something that anyone in the media space can relate to. For example, this is an independent podcast that I do by myself, and just having my own studio apartment, to have a half decent studio setup, has gone a long way. Getting this microphone, the little mixer that I've got, small milestones that do mean a lot to me, because it's getting me to where I want to be. I mean, I've always said there's two things in life that I would consider, real achievements for me. One is getting my own home studio podcast set up, and the other being having a home gym. So if I can get those two ticked off, then I'll consider it.
And they're both easier to obtain than I think you think. But those are not difficult things to get. Trust me, you can get those two things.
Okay. Expand on that. What was the process like of seeing BlackAcademic, essentially your baby, grow over time to what it is now?
So something I'm realizing as I get older, Max, is that very few things in life are hard. Most things aren't that hard. And the things that I think we think are hard, when you really sit down and calm down and think it through, are not that hard to get. So I say that because the idea of setting up a production company and a show of the scale of our shows must seem like, oh wow, you need lots and lots of money and lots of this. And listen, I spent a lot of money on BlackAcademic, yes. But essentially, I reached out to a couple of people I knew that worked in production. I told them my vision and what I wanted to do. They jumped on board and said, yeah, we're with that as well. I reached out to a few venues to shoot it. I called in some favors from some friends of mine in the media to be panelists. And my brother, I've got to big up my brother. My brother was my brother's one of those people that is just very good at everything. And if he's not good at it, he can just Google it and find out how you do it. And in 5 minutes, he's like worked it out. And it's like, okay, great. So I've got to big him up. He was a massive help in the initial part of it as well. I just drawed people in. I think it's about looking at the resources and the weapons you have around you, and then just drawing on them. You'll find that you've got a lot more of the things that you need around you than you think. And it's just about applying those things and being humble and authentic. And I just asked for people's help, and they helped me. I had to pay some people, I had to pay for a venue, I had to pay for some things, of course. But in the main, it's not that hard. What is your vision and how can you make it happen? Now, I'm quite extra. So I was in a fancy studio. We shoot up with 8 cameras. It was all extra. The reality is I could have done just as good a job with half of all of that and scaled it down. It didn't have to be as complex as I made it. But the way I am, I like to make things harder for myself because I'm weird like that. But the reality is that you can get your own studio. And let's not, when you say get your own studio, the idea, I think people still have a studio is what they saw 15, 20 years ago, which is like lots of speakers and a massive desk and 14 screens, a microphone and a recorder in a room. That's a studio. You've got a studio, bro.
Yeah.
You've got a studio. Do you know what I mean? It might not be the studio that Dr. Dre has, do you know what I mean, or Pharrell has, but even they would tell you, if you've got a laptop, you've got a studio. Laptop with some headphones, you've got a studio. So sometimes I think we have to just simplify what it is we think we want as well. So it's one thing we want this, but it's hard. I've got to work 5 years, 10 years. No, you can have that in 5 months. You can have that in 5 months, or even go one step further, Max. When you unpack it, as I just said to you just then, you actually got it. You actually got a studio. What for you, when you say you want to get your own studio, what do you mean? What does that mean to you?
I'm very inspired by Joe Rogan. I don't know if you've watched much of the Joe Rogan Experience, but the evolution of his podcast, I'm not as big of an advocate of it as I used to be. I think it has changed over time. And I feel like the main reason why people watch his podcast, I think undisputably it is the biggest podcast in the world. And the pull that he has and the guests that he have, the guests are the reason why you watch the show. But in addition to that, technically that podcast is faultless. Very rarely now are there any technical mishaps. The studio space, the big screen that both of the guests can view, the producer Jamie who's always on hand, just that space where it is like we were talking about before, where you have that human to human interaction, communication to completely lock in on that with a human being without having to worry about different technical mishaps. I would say that is my vision. God knows how long it's going to take me to get it.
Well, I was just going to say, you're not that far away from it than you think. You've got this idea in your head of Joe Rogan has this massive team, and he probably has got a big team, and it's millions of pounds spent and red. You can obtain that type of podcast for a fraction of the price and a fraction of the time. Now, whether you get the amount of followers or viewers that he gets, that's a different issue, because like you said, that comes down to then the guests you have on that sort of thing, and they pull in a lot of interest. But the actual podcast, the look and sound of it, you're not as far away from it. You're not as far away from it as you think you are, bro. Trust me.
Okay. I appreciate the words of support. As far as looking into the future, not only for BlackAcademic but for your career, what do you hope to achieve in the long term?
So my big thing, Matt, is all about impact. I'm very big on making an impact. It's all well and good. Talk is all well and good. Numbers and views are all well and good. That's all great. But what does it mean? Is it having any impact? BlackAcademic was set up to have an impact. And I've used the word empower. I want people to feel empowered. When they see our shows, I want them to feel empowered by what they see. I want people to watch our level up shows and think, oh, okay, that guy's broken down the 5 tips on how to be X, Y, Z. I'm going to go and do that now. I want people to watch It's All BlackAcademic and watch a debate and be like, okay, I don't agree with what he or she said, but there were some really interesting views there. And I'm going to take those and go away and really think about how I think about that subject. I want people to look at our show, That's the Way Love Goes, and understand the ups and downs of a relationship and really realize that, oh, wow, it's not just me that has issues with my partner or my girlfriend or boyfriend regarding our two careers. And because of our careers, we hardly see each other. Or it's not just me and my partner that had issues getting over an abortion. That happens with other people as well. I want people to see our content and see our work and actually be impacted by it. I don't care about getting 1 million views. What's more important to me is the people that are watching our shows, it means something to them. If they feel something like, oh yeah, okay, I took something away from that. So the long-term goal for BlackAcademic for me is to grow our membership and try and reach as many people as possible. But equally, if not more important than the growth in terms of numbers, is as long as we're having an impact, I'm happy. Do you know what I mean? I'm happy as long as we're making an impact. The minute we stop making an impact, we're just putting out content. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to be that guy that's putting out content. There's so many platforms that I could name that put out shows every day or every week, all the time. And then 2 years later, you forgot that show because they're just churning out content. There's no impact being made. I want to always be making impacts. The minute we stop making impact, we have to significantly reevaluate what we're doing or just stop.
I 100% agree with that. And any presenter, host, or personality in the media space, I genuinely think the moment that you start doing it for views or followers, I think you've sold your soul. I feel like at the core of this is wanting to make that impact, is wanting to connect with people. And one of the things that I would be interested to hear from you is, obviously, you have this background in talking about, say, for example, youth cultural issues, different societal problems. You mentioned their relationships. Do you get the confidence to address these different issues through your experiences when you were younger to now? Because I know a lot of people would maybe feel out of place to comment on sort of different issues of that nature, if you know what I mean.
Sure, I get my confidence from living through a lot of the things that I talk about. So I tend to try not to speak about things that I have no experience or minimal understanding of, because that's when you get ignorance. Do you know what I mean? You can Google and find me on 1 million podcasts, but they're always on subjects and issues of things that I can talk about with authenticity and honesty. I've lived it. I can talk about racism because I've lived it. I can talk about opportunities not being given to young people because I've seen it firsthand. I can talk about football because I know my football. I can't talk about what it's like being a woman and gay in the workplace. I can have an opinion on what that must be like, but I can't talk on that because that's not an experience that's authentic to me or one that I'm informed enough about to talk with credibility. But I can talk about disability and what it's like being disabled in the workplace. So I get my confidence from just talking about issues and drawing up subject matters through my content and shows, through being authentic and through being a person that you can trust I know what I'm talking about. Again, you may not agree with what I'm saying, but you can't not listen to me, because at the bare minimum, you can't tell me that I don't understand that subject well. So that's kind of where I get it from. I advise other people to just understand your strengths. You haven't got to give an opinion on everything. You don't have to have something to say. People on Twitter, on social media, have this thing where they're under pressure to have an opinion on everything. There are some things that are happening in the world, and there's some big issues happening that I haven't got an opinion on. Yeah. Or if I do, it's not a well thought through one, but that's okay. You can't have an opinion. The people that worry me are the people that have an opinion on everything. How can you have an opinion on everything? You don't know everything. So just my thing would be to create the content and build the show around things that are authentic to you, that make you happy, and that people can look at you with credibility and be like, I'd watch your show because I know that you know that area well.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Authenticity is essential. I would 100% would agree with that, man. And looking at concluding now, I know today is one hell of a day for football. There are some excellent games of football on today, mate. We've got all these rivalries, man. El Clasico's later tonight. Of course, them lot across Stanley Park against Manchester United.
Come on,
Inter Milan versus get out. You've got Inter Milan versus Juventus. So, are you going to be watching Man United against Liverpool? Yeah,
I am. So I'm doing that for news. So I'm going to watch that a bit later, and do that for the news. I'm going to miss the Juventus games. I'm going out after work to a function, so I'm going to watch all the other games on catch up and highlights of the weekend. But yeah, so many great games this weekend. So I hope they live up to expectation.
Yeah, how'd you see? I hate it when people call it the Northwest Derby because it's not a derby. Geographically, it's not a derby; it's a rivalry. How'd you see Man United Liverpool going?
You know what? I find it funny what's happening in Man United. So and I have no time for Liverpool. I don't like them at all. But I want Liverpool to smash them. I want Liverpool to absolutely smash Man United to pieces. It's a hard one to call, actually. I mean, these games often end up in a goalless draw or a boring draw. So I'll go with a draw. But if United don't get their stuff together today, it could be, if Liverpool really turn up, it could get messy. It could get really messy at Old Trafford today. So that propensity is definitely there. That could happen. But United, Ole seems to kind of save his bacon in these kind of games. When he's on the brink, he seems to always kind of pull it back, doesn't he? So I'm normally quite good at predictions, but I can't quite call this one. So I'm going to sit on the fence and say I'm going to go for a goalless draw.
Okay, not a Cristiano Ronaldo injury time winner to save Ollie a couple of weeks again.
Not. I really hope not.
Listen, Jordan. I just want to say, man, it has been a pleasure to connect with you and have the opportunity.
No, man, thanks for getting me on.
To speak with you one-on-one. And as I say, the last time that we spoke, we talked about different societal issues and in and out of football, which I found really, insightful. And I could badger on for hours about them. So you are more than welcome to come on the podcast in the future.
Anytime you want to come on, just let me know, man. I'll be there. I'm up for it.
And it would be a pleasure. Maybe one day we could meet up or something, because of the same, man.
Yeah, mate.
You're really inspiring guy as far as I'm concerned.
Are you based in the north? Are you in Liverpool? Or are you London?
Yep, I'm in Liverpool, but I am really looking at moving to London. I've just lost an opportunity that would have seen me move to London, but there's another opportunity there which maybe, if it goes well enough, I could end up in London. So I'll keep you posted.
Anytime you're in London, man, just make sure you give me a call. I'd be happy to meet up with you, man. It's no problem at all.
Fantastic. It's been great to speak to you, man. Take care.
You too, man. Take care, pal.